The wind howled across the slate-gray sea like a chorus of spirits lost to time. Einar gripped the oar with raw hands, veins bulging against the cold as salt spray lashed his face. His longship had left Iceland days ago, meant to skim the coast of Greenland, trading dried fish and polished antler for walrus ivory and stories. But the wind had turned, and then it had screamed. Now Einar's ship groaned under frozen ropes, its sail a torn sheet flapping weakly in the growing blizzard. His crew, what remained of them, had long stopped shouting. Only Einar remained at the helm, jaw locked, steering into nothingness. It had started with a creak beneath the hull. Then, like a splintering bone, the ice cracked in a sudden sharp roar. The sea opened just long enough to suck the longship down, not to sink it, but to swallow it whole in a tomb of black, churning water. Einar was flung into the waves, striking something hard and cold before the world went dark. When he awoke, the world was white. Snow drifted like feathers through the gray sky. Einar lay sprawled on an ice shelf, his fingers blue and stiff, his beard a block of rime. The longship was nowhere in sight. No oars, no sails, just an expanse of untouched snow and jagged shards of glacier rising in silence. He tried to stand. His left knee buckled, and he fell again, hissing through his teeth. Days may have passed, or mere hours, but eventually hunger pulled him upright. Hunger and something else. A faint column of smoke curling against the white horizon. Einar stumbled toward it, dragging himself over snowdrifts and frozen ridges until the shape of wooden rooftops emerged through the haze. The village looked as though it had been carved directly from the ice. Roofs low and heavy with snow, fences woven from whalebones and driftwood, and smoke from chimney holes that refused to rise. It only curled sideways in the bitter wind, as if reluctant to leave. 3 villagers met him at the edge. Their faces were furlined, solemn, and still. Their eyes scanned him not with concern, but with something like disbelief, as though he'd walked out of a saga they'd forgotten centuries ago. They spoke in a Norse that was twisted, older, filled with unfamiliar vowel shifts and guttural syllables. Einar answered haltingly, drawing on tales his grandfather told by the hearth phrases from the sagas, words older than the mainland. They brought him inside. The hut was warm, stifling even. Whale oil burned in low stone lamps. Dried fish hung from rafters. One man, a broad-shouldered elder with bone beads braided into his beard, pressed a cup of fermented milk into Einar's hand. They asked where he'd come from. He said Iceland. Their eyes widened. They asked who ruled. He said Harald, though even he wasn't sure anymore. They murmured among themselves. Outside, the wind howled again. He stayed with them through the night, curled beneath reindeer hides. No one spoke of helping him return. No one asked his plans. It was as if his arrival was already folded into the village's rhythm. The next morning, he woke to the sight of the elder sitting quietly beside him, sharpening a blade with stone and sinew. "You fell from the edge," the man said in a voice like gravel. "The storm sent you." Einar said nothing. The fire crackled softly between them. Outside, children were sliding on frozen banks. Women broke holes in the ice to fish. Men repaired sleds and fletched arrows with raven feathers. Life here was steady, deliberate, untouched by the rush of kings and trade, and Einar, though uncertain, felt no urge to leave not yet. Later, as he limped to the edge of the village, he looked out across the sea-flat, white and infinite. A single thought hovered behind his eyes like mist. No one would come for him. No one could. He had vanished, and the world had likely already moved on. Still, he was not alone. A young boy approached, holding something in his gloved hands, a wooden figurine crudely carved, but familiar. It was a longship, though the sail bore a crescent moon instead of a dragon. Einar took it gently, his brows furrowing. The boy spoke softly. "It came before you did, in the snow." That night the aurora began to dance, its green ribbons writhing across the sky. The village gathered outside, silent and reverent, as the heavens shimmered like fire on water. Einar stood among them, heart heavy with wonder. Somewhere between the silence and the stars he felt it, the sense that something was watching. Not malevolent, but ancient, patient, waiting. And in that moment he knew he hadn't simply washed ashore by chance. He had been pulled. The village was called Skilledheim, though the name meant little to Einar. It didn't appear on any map he'd seen, and none of its people spoke of other settlements. There were perhaps 50 souls here, all bound together by the rhythm of snow, ice, and wind. In the days that followed, Einar began to heal. His knee remained stiff, but he learned to walk again with the help of a carved driftwood cane. The villagers gave him a corner of one of the longhouses, where he slept beside a wall etched with faded symbol, solder than the runes he knew. They fed him dried seal meat and slabs of frozen whale blubber. Warmed fermented milk became his morning ritual, though the sour tang made his stomach churn. No one ever asked him to stay, but no one ever told him to leave. One evening, as the auroras pulsed in slow, hypnotic waves above the ice fields, Einar joined a gathering in the village's central hall. The long room was dark but warm, lit by oil lamps made from puffin skulls and the fat of sea creatures. Elders sat in a circle, speaking slowly, their words paced like breath in winter air. Einar leaned closer to listen. At first he couldn't follow. Their dialect slid sideways, strange and curling, but one word kept returning, Kvetulven, the white wolf. He asked the woman beside him what it meant. She was elderly, her hair wrapped in seal leather, her face marked by lines deep and sharp like chisel strokes. She glanced at him, eyes unreadable. "It is not a wolf," she said softly, "but it walks like one, long legs, white fur, and it watches from the edge." "Has it killed?" She shook her head. "It doesn't need to." Later that night, a hunter returned to the village far too early. His sled was overturned, dogs missing, eyes wild. He spoke in short bursts, gesturing toward the horizon. He had followed fresh caribou tracks deep into the ice fields, then silence. Not the quiet of snow, but a deeper stillness, the kind that makes the ears ring. Then he saw it, tall, pale, watching him from a ridge. No growl, no howl, just presence. The next day, Einar asked to join the next hunt. The villagers hesitated. Foreigners didn't hunt here. They were not of this ice. But the elder Torvik, whose beard held more bone than hair, finally agreed. "If you are to stay," he said, "you must see what waits beyond the ice crest." They left at dawn, 6 of them in total, dogs straining at the harnesses, breath steaming in plumes. Einar borrowed a spear, though he doubted his ability to use it well. His knee still burned with each step, but he gritted his teeth and said nothing. The tundra was endless, no trees, no birds, only undulating plains of snow and the distant shimmer of ice ridges like the backs of buried sea serpents. Hours passed, then movement. Torvik raised a hand. The dogs froze. Caribou. 3 of them grazing near a shallow dip in the snow. One hunter circled left, another crept forward. Einar stayed back with Torvik watching, but before anyone could act, a strange hush fell again. The wind stilled. Even the dogs ceased to pant. The hunters lowered their weapons instinctively, spines stiffening. Then they saw it. Standing on the ridge framed by the early dusk was a shape, slender, tall, and almost glowing in the blue half-light. Its legs were long too long, and it moved like a ghost on silent paws. A thick mane of white fur trailed behind it like smoke. No eyes visible, just presence. The caribou scattered. The hunters stood still. The creature tilted its head just slightly. Then it was gone. Not vanished in a sprint or a blur. It simply wasn't there anymore. One blink and the ridge was empty. They searched the snow. No tracks. Not even a dent in the powder. The dogs whimpered and pulled at their harnesses, eager to return. That night back at Skilledheim, the fire burned high, but no songs were sung. Torvik sat silently by the flames, turning something over in his hands. Einar leaned closer. It was a tooth. Long and yellowed, like a wolf's but with unfamiliar ridges along the edge, and oddly polished. Torvik didn't speak, but he didn't stop Einar from looking. In the corner of the longhouse, the old woman with the sea leather hair was humming. Not a song, exactly, just a rise and fall of notes, like the wind through bones. That night, Einar didn't sleep. Instead, he watched the ceiling, traced the etchings with his eyes, and wondered what kind of world he had fallen into. A world where villages existed off the maps, where beasts left no tracks, where snow could hush even memory. He didn't feel trapped. But he did feel very, very far from home. The morning light crept pale and fragile over the icy horizon, painting the snowfields in muted grays and blues. Einar awoke to a quiet stir in the village. Word had spread overnight the white beast had returned, and it was more than a rumor now. Einar dressed quickly in his patched leathers and fur, slipping outside to the biting air. The village was unusually still. The usual clatter of daily chores was replaced by whispered conversations and furtive glances toward the distant tundra. Torvik gathered the hunters near the longhouse entrance, the tooth clenched tightly in his weathered hand. "Tonight we hunt," he said simply. Einar's heart thrummed. Though uncertain, he felt drawn into this hunt, not just by duty, but by something deeper, a pull toward the unknown. The day crept by in a blur of preparation. Spears were sharpened with care, dog harnesses tightened, and every man and woman checked their gear with the nervous focus of those facing an unseen threat. As twilight wrapped the village in cold shadows, 6 hunters set out again across the frozen plains. Einar, leaning heavily on his cane, followed at the rear. The white wolf was not just a creature of flesh and bone, it was something different. The villagers whispered of it being a guardian or a harbinger, an echo from the ancient wilds where spirits walked unseen. They moved silently, the snow muffling their footsteps, until they reached the ridge where the beast had been spotted before. Einar's breath caught when he saw the track's enormous paw prints, far larger than any wolf's, pressed deep into the hard-packed snow. But the oddest thing was the Shipwreck circle with 3 distinct toes instead of the usual 4. Torvik knelt, tracing the pattern with a gloved finger. "Not from any creature I know," he murmured. Then a gust of wind swept over the ridge, carrying with it a faint metallic scent. Cold, sharp tang that made Einar's skin prickle. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled softly. It was subtle at first, like a heartbeat beneath the ice, but growing steadily louder. Before they could react, the earth cracked open in a long fissure, splitting the ridge with a thunderous roar. From the crevice rose a low fog, thick and swirling, smelling faintly of iron and something older like rust and forgotten memories. The hunters froze, eyes wide. Out of the mist, 2 gleaming eyes appeared, pale and unblinking. Then a massive shape emerged, not the white wolf, but something far stranger, a gigantic bear-like beast, its fur patchy and frost-covered, with tusks curving down from its massive jaws. The creature didn't charge. Instead, it watched them, slow and deliberate, before turning and vanishing back into the mist. Einar swallowed hard. "The guardian is not alone," he whispered. They followed the mist down the ridge, coming upon an ancient site half buried in ice, a circle of standing stones carved with strange symbols that shimmered faintly under the moonlight. One stone bore the image of a great beast, half wolf, half something else. Its eyes were etched with tiny crystals that caught the light and scattered it like stars. Einar touched the stone, fingers tracing the carvings. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through his hand, and for a moment the symbols glowed bright blue. The hunters pulled back, unsettled. Torvik muttered, "The old magic still lives here." As they made camp nearby, the old woman from the village appeared, silent as a shadow, carrying a small iron box. She handed it to Einar, saying, "Inside are secrets from the ancestors. They guarded these lands long before us." Inside the box, Einar found fragments of bone, carved with runes, and a piece of polished blue stone that shimmered softly even in the cold. That night, under the flickering auroras, Einar lay awake, pondering the strange connection between the village, the beasts, and the ancient magic that still pulsed beneath the ice. He realized that Skilledheim was not just a forgotten village, it was a living relic of a past where humans and spirits once shared the land in uneasy balance. And Einar, the Viking hunter lost to the storm, had been drawn into that balance no longer just a survivor, but a participant in a tale older than any saga he'd known. Winter tightened its grip on Skilledheim, wrapping the village in endless nights and brittle cold. The days were short, the sun a pale disk skimming low over the horizon, never fully rising. Einar spent most of his time learning the ways of this frozen world, guided by Torvik and the old woman, Astrid, who seemed to carry the weight of secrets in her quiet gaze. One morning, while exploring the outskirts beyond the village's fragile fence of driftwood, Einar stumbled upon something buried beneath a thin layer of snow, a low mound, roughly circular, capped by a weathered wooden frame half swallowed by ice. Curiosity overtook caution. With slow hands numbed by cold, Einar began to clear the snow, revealing intricate carvings etched into the wood spirals and figures that twisted like the roots of ancient trees. This was no ordinary grave, it was a burial mound, crafted with care and respect. As he brushed away the last flakes, Einar noticed a faint outline beneath the frozen earth bones, bleached white by time but arranged deliberately. Carefully, he pried open the wooden lid. Inside lay tools unlike any he had seen: a polished bone knife with a handle wrapped in sinew, a small wooden box sealed tight, and delicate trinkets carved from walrus ivory. Their craftsmanship was exquisite, almost otherworldly. Einar's breath caught. These were not the usual Viking relics. The style was strange, bearing marks that resembled runes, but different, older, more angular, almost like a forgotten script. He called Torvik and Astrid, and together they examined the find. Astrid's eyes narrowed as she traced the carvings with trembling fingers. "These are from the ancestors," she said quietly, "the ones who came before even our grandfathers spoke of." Torvik nodded gravely. "Long ago, before the ice claimed this land, people traveled here from distant shores far beyond what our sagas tell." Einar felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold air. The discovery hinted at a history lost beneath centuries of snow and silence. These were the footprints of migrations forgotten, whispers of journeys no map recorded. That night, as the aurora painted the sky in ghostly greens and blues, the village gathered around a fire. Torvik told stories, old legends of travelers guided by stars and spirits, of lands swallowed by ice, and of guardians that protected sacred ground. Einar listened, the weight of the past pressing on him. The bones beneath the mound were a reminder this land had seen more than he ever imagined. It had been a crossroads of peoples, a place where worlds collided and faded. But the mystery deepened when Astrid produced the small wooden box from the mound. Inside was a strange crystal, clouded yet radiant, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. "Sky shards," she whispered, revering the artifact. "Fragments from the heavens, gifts from the gods." Einar turned it over, the cold stone burning slightly against his palm. He remembered the village hearth, the fire that never died, the blue flames that flickered with unnatural light. Could it be linked? In the days that followed, Einar noticed the fire's glow in the old woman's hut. Blue, steady, and never faltering, it cast shadows that danced like spirits. Astrid allowed him near one evening, letting him touch the hearthstone, warm despite the chill. She told him stories of a time when fire was a sacred gift, guarded by those who understood its power. This flame was more than heat, it was a tether to something beyond mortal reach. Einar began to feel the boundaries between the world he knew and this icy realm blur. The village, the bones, the blue fire, the strange beast on the ridge, all threads woven into a tapestry larger than himself. And somewhere deep in the Arctic silence, the wind whispered secrets waiting to be uncovered, Night after night, the blue flames in Astrid's hearth glowed steadily, casting an eerie light that seemed almost alive. Einar became fascinated by this unnatural fire, which never flickered out, never weakened, and refused to burn away the small pile of driftwood Astrid kept replenishing with quiet reverence. One evening, as the wind rattled the wooden walls like skeletal fingers, Einar asked Astrid about the fire. Her eyes, reflecting the blue glow, softened with a rare tenderness. "This fire is from the sky," she said in a voice like dry leaves brushing the snow. "Long ago, a shard fell from the heavens gifted to our people by the gods. It holds the power of light and life in the endless darkness." Einar tried to imagine such a gift, something alive, glowing with cold blue flames even in the bitter Arctic chill. He remembered the sky shards he had seen in the burial mound, those radiant crystals that pulsed like hidden stars. Could this fire be the same magic? Or perhaps a fragment of the ancient world itself, captured in flickering flames? Astrid poured a small bowl of the blue-tinged embers into a shallow stone dish. The flames did not burn the bowl, but danced quietly atop it, casting deep shadows on her face. "Many fear this fire," she continued. "It is a reminder that even in darkness there is light, but it must be respected. The fire chooses its keepers carefully, and if it ever dies, so will the village." Einar felt a chill beneath her words. He thought of the strange white beast stalking the tundra, the silent watcher, and of the ancient burial mound. The threads connecting this place were tighter than he'd realized. The next morning, he found himself drawn back to the mound, running his gloved fingers over the carvings. Among the ancient runes, one symbol repeated a circle divided by a jagged line, half dark, half light. It was a symbol he had seen once before, in a worn tapestry back in Islanda. Mark of balance, of worlds divided yet connected. Einar's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden sound, a deep rumbling howl echoing across the frozen plains. The village hushed immediately, eyes searching the horizon. It was the beast again. Torvik gathered the hunters quickly, this time with urgency. They set out toward the sound, moving cautiously across the brittle ice. Einar joined, spear in hand, though he felt the familiar ache in his knee. As they approached the ridge where the creature had been seen, the wind shifted, carrying a metallic scent mixed with something faintly sweet like honey frozen in time. Then, through the swirling snow, a figure emerged. Not the great beast, but a smaller creature, a white fox with eyes shining bright like polished stones. The fox moved without fear, weaving between the hunters, its gaze fixed on Einar. Torvik watched quietly. "A messenger," he said softly. "The spirits speak through it." The fox led them to a narrow crevice in the ice, barely visible beneath a dusting of snow. Einar peered inside and saw a passage carved deep into the glacier, its walls shimmering with crystals that caught the torchlight. The hunters exchanged glances. This was no ordinary ice cave, it was a gateway. Torvik turned to Einar. "This is where your journey truly begins." And as the blue flames flickered behind them, the village of Skilledheim held its breath. The entrance to the glacier's hidden cave was a narrow slit, framed by jagged ice that glittered like 1,000 frozen stars. Einar's breath came out in misty clouds as he squeezed through, his worn boots crunching softly on the crystalline floor. The air inside was eerily still, tinged with a sharp scent like metal left to frost. Deeper and deeper they went, the walls narrowing, the glow from their torches reflected in kaleidoscopes of frozen light. Einar's eyes caught glimpses of strange symbols carved faintly into the ice runes, unlike any he'd ever seen, angular and sharp, their meaning lost to time. Each step seemed to echo in a silent chamber, as if the cave itself was holding its breath. Suddenly the passage opened into a vast cavern, where the ice walls shimmered with a surreal glow. In the center lay a great stone altar, worn smooth by centuries of touch, dusted with frost but humming with an unseen energy. Surrounding it were scattered bones, animal and human arranged with meticulous care, as if part of an ancient ritual. Torvik knelt beside the altar, running his fingers along the carvings. "This is a place of power," he whispered. "The Old Ones came here to commune with the spirits of the land and sky." Einar's gaze was drawn to a large bone resting atop the altar, carved with a spiral that seemed to twist and turn endlessly. It radiated a strange warmth despite the cold. As they studied the chamber, the silence was shattered by a distant rumble, a low, rolling thunder that seemed to come from beneath the glacier itself. The cavern trembled, ice shards tinkling like glass. Einar looked to Torvik, who nodded grimly. "The mountain is waking." Suddenly, a cold wind swept through the chamber, carrying with it a faint metallic tang and a whisper of voices, like echoes trapped in ice. The hunters shivered but held their ground. At that moment, Einar noticed a narrow tunnel leading deeper still, its mouth glowing faintly with a blue light, the same hue as the hearthfire back in Skilledheim. Drawn by an irresistible pull, Einar stepped forward into the glowing passage, leaving Torvik and the others behind. The tunnel curved and twisted, opening into a hidden chamber where a shard of crystal floated suspended in mid-air, glowing softly with an inner light. It pulsed gently like a heartbeat. Einar reached out a trembling hand. The moment his fingers brushed the shard, visions flooded his mind, swirling ice fields, vast migrations, forgotten peoples guided by stars and spirits, and the white wolf watching silently through the centuries. He saw the birth of Skilledheim, built atop sacred ground where sky shards fell like fire. He saw the balance of light and shadow maintained by those who understood the power of fire and ice. Then the vision shifted to a warning and impending storm greater than any before, threatening to swallow the land whole unless the balance was preserved. Einar pulled back, breathless. The shard's glow faded, but the weight of its message lingered. Returning to the cavern, he shared what he'd seen. Torvik's face darkened. The old magic stirs. The guardians awaken. As they left the cave, the sky above burst into wild auroras, green and purple ribbons twisting in furious dance. Einar felt the weight of destiny settle on his shoulders. The hunter who had disappeared into the Arctic was now part of something far larger, a story written in ice and fire, waiting to be told. Einar emerged from the glacier's depths into a world transformed. The ice plain stretched before him like a shimmering mirror, cracked in jagged patterns that caught the morning light. The air was thin and sharp, carrying the faint scent of salt and ancient stone. At the far edge of the frozen expanse, he spotted something extraordinary, a massive sled-like vessel, half buried in ice, its wood darkened by centuries of frost. The mast was broken, but a tattered flag still clung to the rigging, a crescent moon emblazoned in deep blue against faded white. The ship's size was staggering, easily 3 times larger than any Viking longship Einar had known. It resembled a beast trapped in ice, its hull carved with intricate patterns of waves and beasts frozen in time. Approaching cautiously, Einar ran his fingers over the weathered wood, feeling the grooves and knots beneath his gloves. He spotted an inscription on the side runes unlike any Norse design, angular and harsh, mixed with spirals and strange symbols. As he circled the ship, he noticed a carved figurehead, a majestic tusked creature, half mammoth, half serpent, its eyes carved from polished amber. The figure seemed to watch him silently, a guardian frozen in place. Einar wondered who had built this ship and what journey it had undertaken before becoming trapped in the Arctic ice. Inside the vessel's hull, he found remnants of life-rusted tools, a scattering of bones arranged in a deliberate pattern, and a small wooden box sealed with a carved clasp. He opened it with care, revealing fragments of old parchment inscribed with a strange language, a mixture of runes and unfamiliar symbols, hinting at a lost culture that had sailed these frozen seas long before. One parchment bore a mappa-swirling maze of ice fields, mountains, and uncharted waters, with a symbol marking a mysterious circle of light. Einar felt a chill not from the cold but from realization. The ship was a relic of a forgotten expedition, a people who had crossed realms, tracing paths beyond the edges of known worlds. The ship's secrets hinted at alliances and migrations lost to time, echoes of a past where men and beasts, ice and fire, were entwined in a dance of survival and discovery. As the Arctic wind whispered through the broken sails, Einar knew that uncovering the ship's story would be key to understanding the strange land he had come to inhabit. And so, with renewed purpose, he began to chart a course beyond the ice road, toward the unknown heart of the Arctic wilderness. The interior of the tusk ship was cloaked in shadows, the cold biting through Einar's furs as he explored the narrow corridors. The walls bore carvings runes that twisted and turned in strange patterns, some familiar yet distorted, others utterly alien. They formed a language etched in stone, a forgotten script lost to Viking memory. Bones lay arranged in ritualistic circles along the wooden floor, some human, others of beasts long vanished from the land. Each grouping seemed deliberate, a silent message to those who might come after. Einar's fingers traced a circle of small bones shaped like claws, and a shiver ran down his spine. He found a chamber at the ship's heart, where a stone pedestal held a crystalline orb, dull now but once glowing with a faint light. Surrounding it were pictograph scenes of starry skies, frozen seas, and figures crossing from one world to another. Einar's mind spun. These were not mere sailors, but travelers, keepers of secrets between realms, voyagers who had charted paths beyond mortal understanding. The ship was a vessel not just of wood, but of passage between worlds. He remembered the symbols on the altar beneath the glacier, the shards of crystal pulsing like hearts. The ancient magic threaded through the ice, the fire, the beasts, and now here the ship that had sailed the frozen unknown. As he studied the inscriptions, a sudden vibration coursed through the ship. The walls seemed to hum, the air thickening with an unseen energy. The crystalline orb glimmered faintly, awakening after centuries of slumber. Einar stepped back, heart pounding. The ship was alive in a way he could not explain, a relic of a forgotten age pulsing with ancient power. Suddenly, a whisper filled the chamber, a voice carried on the cold wind, speaking in a tongue older than any saga, a language of stars and ice. Though he understood none of the words, the feeling was clear, a summons, a warning, a call to follow the path laid out by those who came before. Outside, the Arctic sky darkened, the auroras twisted into wild spirals, and distant thunder rumbled beneath the ice. Einar knew the journey was far from over. A profound silence fell over the Arctic night, heavier than the thickest snowdrifts, as if the world itself held its breath. Einar stood at the entrance of the tusked ship, the cold wind swirling around him, carrying whispers from the frozen abyss below. Then, without warning, a deafening stillness descended, the kind of silence that presses on the ears, like the calm before a storm that shakes the very bones. Suddenly, the ice beneath his feet trembled. The great glacier groaned and cracked, a deep roar echoing through the vast emptiness. Jagged fissures split open, sending shimmering shards cascading into the dark water below. Einar stumbled back, heart pounding as the ground rolled in slow waves beneath the frozen surface. From the depths of the glacier, ancient creatures awoke, titanic forms long buried beneath the ice, their breaths like thunder, eyes like shards of crystal. The white wolf, the massive tusked beast, and other shadowy figures stirred in the shadows beneath the snow. A thick, unnatural fog rose from the newly formed crevices, swirling around Einar, heavy with the scent of iron and something metallic yet ancient. The air buzzed with a metallic tang, sharp and biting. It smelled of forgotten wars and rusted blades, of iron that had long since turned to dust. Einar's senses reeled. Through the mist, vague outlines moved, massive shapes gliding silently, their footsteps muffled by the fog. The eerie fog wrapped around him, chilling him to the bone, yet he could not move, rooted by a mixture of awe and fear. Suddenly, a faint metallic clang rang out nearby, a distant echo, like a dropped sword striking ancient stone. The fog shifted, revealing spectral silhouettes, warriors clad in frozen armor, faces hidden beneath helmets encrusted with frost, their empty eyes staring into the void. Einar's breath hitched as the unnatural quiet returned, silent thunder without sound. The ice cracked in waves and the massive beasts beneath stirred once more, retreating into shadowed lairs, leaving behind only their whispered warnings. A cold metallic scent lingered as the fog dissipated and the ice settled again, leaving Einar alone with the weight of the frozen silence. The Arctic had spoken in silence and thunder, reminding all who dared to listen of the ancient power beneath. As he steadied himself, Einar felt a shift in the air, something both terrifying and strangely comforting. The old world was alive beneath the ice, waiting, watching, and the hunter was now part of its endless story. Einar fled from the trembling ice and the ghostly shapes that stirred beneath it, seeking refuge in the nearby mountain range that rose like jagged teeth against the Arctic sky. The peaks were sharp and unyielding, but the mountain offered shelter from the restless forces stirring below. He climbed cautiously, muscles aching and breath shallow in the thin air. At last, he found a narrow cave entrance, barely visible beneath a thick drape of frozen moss and icicles. Pulling aside the frost, he slipped inside. The air inside was warmer than outside, filled with a soft hum that seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. The walls glimmered with a strange mineral-mirrored stone that caught the faint light of his torch and fractured it into endless rainbows. It was as if the mountain itself was alive, reflecting and multiplying the light to create a silent symphony of color. Deeper within, the cave opened into a vast chamber. Einar felt the warmth of unseen currents as gentle winds stirred the air, carrying the faint scent of pine and earth, unusual this far north. The space was ancient, untouched by time, with walls covered in carvings, images of great beasts, celestial bodies, and humans reaching toward the stars. He noticed a circle etched into the floor, its lines glowing faintly. Stepping into the center, he felt a subtle vibration beneath his feet, as if the mountain itself was acknowledging his presence. Einar settled near a pool of clear water that reflected the shimmering cave ceiling. The stillness invited rest, and exhaustion finally overcame him. As he closed his eyes, the hum deepened into a lullaby of wind and stone, soothing and endless. In the quiet of the hollow mountain, the weight of his journey lifted. Here, surrounded by ancient echoes, Einar found a moment of peace, a brief respite before the next chapter of the Arctic's eternal tale unfolded. Einar woke to a soft light filtering through the cave's entrance. He stepped outside and found himself in a valley unlike any he had ever seen, bathed in the glow of endless daylight. The sun hung low but never dipped below the horizon, casting long golden shadows across the snow and rock. The valley was alive with strange greenery, hardy mosses, bright lichens, and stunted trees that clung stubbornly to the thin soil. The air was crisp and clean, filled with the scent of fresh earth and distant salt water. For a moment, Einar forgot the biting cold of the Arctic and felt something akin to warmth. As he wandered deeper, he came upon a small settlement nestled between craggy hills. The people there looked different, lighter-skinned, their clothing a patchwork of sealskin and woven fibers unfamiliar to him. They greeted Einar with cautious eyes but spoke a language tinged with Norse, albeit softened and evolved through isolation. They told tales of being descendants of seafarers who had become lost to time, forgotten by the world beyond these mountains. Their ancestors had settled here centuries ago, living under the eternal sun during the summer months, adapting to a cycle of endless light and darkness. Einar listened, fascinated. This was a people both kin and stranger tied to his own roots, yet shaped by the Arctic's unyielding embrace. As days passed, he learned their customs and stories of hunts beneath the midnight sun, of stars that never faded, and of the delicate balance between survival and the land's mysterious rhythms. But Einar's thoughts lingered on Skilledheim, on the village of icebound strangers, and the beasts that prowled the tundra. He knew his journey could not end here. The Arctic's secrets were still calling him, and the map he'd found the circle of light beckoned beyond. With a heavy heart and newfound understanding, Einar prepared to leave the Valley of Endless Daylight. His path was no longer just a quest for survival, but a journey through forgotten histories and whispered legends woven into the very fabric of the frozen north. Einar's departure from the valley was marked by a sky alive with swirling colors, vivid auroras rippling overhead like celestial rivers. He moved steadily, following the map he had found in the ancient ship's hold. Its inked lines guided him toward the Circle of Light, a place shrouded in mystery and legend. The journey took him across rugged ice fields and frozen fjords, where the wind sang mournful songs and the snow crunched beneath his boots. Each night he camped beneath the endless stars, feeling both the vast loneliness of the Arctic and a strange kinship with the land. Along the way, Einar encountered remnants of old Norse travelers' carved markers, half-buried cairns, and the occasional rusted arrowhead. These traces told stories of journeys past, of men who sought the same answers and vanished into the cold. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned a deep violet, Einar found himself standing before a circle of standing stones. Towering pillars of granite, etched with ancient runes and glowing faintly with blue light, encircled a frozen lake that mirrored the sky like glass. This was the Circle of Light. Einar stepped inside, feeling the air thicken with a hum of power. The stones pulsed softly, casting shifting shadows that danced with the flickering auroras above. Here, time seemed to blur past and present folding into one. As he touched the largest stone, visions flooded his mind, images of ancient gatherings, of men and women communing with spirits, of firelight and ice, of white wolves guarding sacred paths. He saw the fate of his own village, Skilledheim, intertwined with this place. The balance between the forces of ice and fire, spirit and flesh, was maintained here in eternal dance that must not be broken. Einar understood then that his disappearance into the Arctic was no accident. He was part of a long lineage, chosen to protect this balance. With quiet resolve, he pledged to honor the old ways, to keep the light alive amidst the frozen dark. And as the auroras shimmered overhead, Einar felt a deep peace settle within him, his story now woven into the endless saga of the Arctic. Einar's days grew colder, the Arctic winter asserting its full power. The land was transformed into a crystalline wilderness where shadows stretched like ghosts beneath the pale sun. The auroras became his constant companions, weaving green and violet ribbons across the endless night sky. Despite the biting cold, Einar felt warmth and purpose. He had become more than a lost Viking. He was now a guardian of ancient secrets, a keeper of balance between worlds. His life intertwined with the rhythms of the ice, the fire, and the spectral beasts that roam the tundra. One evening, as the wind whispered through the hollow bones of the mountains, Einar encountered a strange sight, a great white wolf, larger than any he had imagined, its fur glistening like freshly fallen snow. The creature's eyes met his, pale and knowing, and in that gaze Einar felt the echo of countless generations. The wolf did not flee nor attack. Instead, it circled him once, then vanished silently into the night. Einar understood the guardian of the Arctic had accepted him. In the following days, he observed changes in the village. The blue flames of Astrid's hearth burned brighter, illuminating the longhouse with an ethereal glow. The villagers moved with renewed energy, their stories and songs growing richer, filled with hope and remembrance. Yet, beneath the surface, a quiet tension lingered. The balance was fragile. The ancient forces that sustained this land were powerful but vulnerable. Einar knew that his journey was far from over. The Arctic's mysteries still whispered in the wind, promising trials and revelations yet to come. And so, beneath the dancing lights of the northern sky, Einar prepared himself to face whatever the frozen wilds might send, to protect the fragile harmony he had become a part of. The cold tightened around Skilledheim like a relentless shroud, but Einar moved through the frozen landscape with a steadiness born of acceptance. He was no longer just a hunter chasing shadows, he had become a part of the Arctic's living legend. One day, while exploring the ice fields beyond the village, Einar discovered a hidden valley, sheltered from the harsh winds, a secret garden of moss, lichens, and small thawing pools. Among the greenery stood ancient standing stones, etched with runes that shimmered faintly under the pale sun. Kneeling, Einar traced the carvings and realized they told a story, one of light and shadow, of fire gifted by the heavens, and of the great beasts that guarded the land. The stones spoke of cycles, of balance, and of the delicate thread holding the Arctic's magic intact. He felt a deep connection to this place, as if the stones whispered directly to his soul. It was a sacred ground, a sanctuary where past and present converged. That night, as the auroras danced overhead, Einar returned to Skilledheim with a newfound reverence. He shared his discovery with Torvik and Astrid, who nodded solemnly, understanding the significance. The village gathered around the blue flames, sharing stories and songs that echoed through the longhouse. Einar watched the faces of the people, weathered yet alive with hope, and felt the comforting rhythm of community and tradition. Though the Arctic was vast and unforgiving, here was a spark of warmth, a flame of life that endured beyond the ice. Einar knew that no matter how far the frozen wilderness stretched, no matter how deep the secrets buried beneath the snow, this fragile light would guide him home. The Arctic winter began to wane, the sun inching higher each day, promising a slow return of warmth. Einar stood on the edge of the frozen sea, the ice cracking softly beneath his boots. The vast expanse of white stretched endlessly, but the harshness no longer felt like a prison. Instead, it was a vast living story, one he was part of now. The white wolf, the blue flames, the ancient ship, the sacred stones, they were threads in a tapestry that stretched beyond time. Einar looked up as the auroras faded with the dawn, their vibrant colors dissolving into the soft light of morning. He felt a quiet peace settle over him, a sense of belonging he had never known before. The Arctic was no longer just a place of survival or mystery, it was home. He thought of Skilledheim, of the villagers who had accepted a lost Viking with a broken knee, of the old woman who tended the eternal fire and the hunters who faced the unseen together, of the strange beasts and ancient magic that had woven their lives into a delicate balance. Einar knew his journey was part of something larger, a cycle that would continue long after he was gone. The Arctic's secrets were eternal, shifting like the ice and stars, inviting new stories and new guardians. As the sun rose fully, casting gentle warmth over the snow, Einar took a deep breath and stepped forward, ready for whatever lay beyond the horizon. The Arctic landscape, with its endless snowfields and shimmering skies, holds more than just cold and silence. It carries stories, whispers of ancient times, of guardians unseen and journeys untold. As you rest now, imagine the gentle pulse of the blue flame, the silent watch of the white wolf, and the quiet strength of a man who became part of this eternal story. Let the soft dance of the northern lights lull your thoughts, each flicker a gentle breath in the vastness of time. Feel the calm embrace of the frozen world, where every crack in the ice and every howl in the wind is a note in a timeless lullaby. Close your eyes and drift into that quiet night, where mysteries unfold slowly and peace flows like a slow river beneath the stars. Here in this frozen world you are safe, held by the vastness and the gentle watch of the Arctic's eternal heart. Sleep well and dream of light in the darkest places,